And what she found was so interesting for me because it wasn't what I thought it was. Like I thought it was something to do with a father wound. My parents separated when I was young and I didn't grow up with my father. I met him when I was 18. I grew up with a stepfather and I had some conflicts with him. So I was like, it's got to be something about the father. And then what came up for her was there was like stored grief and sadness were the words she used in my body that I hadn't processed related to motherhood. And so I was like, oh, wow. Like the first thing that came to mind wasn't my mother, it was actually me becoming a
As a
mother.
mother.
Yeah.
Emerge Stories is a place where, as the name implies, you are going to hear stories. Stories from people all over the Philippines who have come from many different types of backgrounds, and especially people who have gone through struggles, people who have gone through the challenging parts of life. And I hope that these stories will relate for you in some way, that some of these stories will really land for you because these people have gone through probably just about the same thing you might be going through right now. Today on Emerge Stories, I am joined by another friend of mine, somebody I've learned a lot from, named Wendy, also known as Kazane. She's originally from Manila, but has spent a lot of her time in the past years in Cebu. She's also lived all over the world and traveled quite a bit. And Wendy has become an energy healer, a mentor, and a coach that a lot of people have learned a lot from. And also a lot of people I know have done a lot of healing with her. She's a student of Bushido, the path of the samurai. And as we speak, I believe she's in Japan actually studying Bushido right now, which is so cool. She's also studying for her PhD in clinical psychology at the University of Philippines, Diliman. And her mission is to really help as many people as possible to become their own best healers through use of energy, meditation, plant medicine, movement, among other modalities. I hope you guys really enjoy this conversation with Wendy or Kazane. And I hope that you learned something. I hope something in her story is useful for you. As always, if something here is inspiring and something here does inspire you to take more ownership of your own future growth, your own learning, your own health, your own healing, please take a moment and share this with someone that you think could benefit from it as well. And there's just so many cool, amazing stories of people in the Philippines. And this is just one more of them. I really hope it lands for you. Hope it's great. And thank you, as always, so much for being here. Let's jump into the conversation. Welcome, Wendy, to Emerge PH Stories. Thanks for being here.
Yay. Thank you, Eli. It's my pleasure.
I'm looking forward to hearing maybe parts of your story that I haven't heard before. Um,
Oh.
So, jumping in, can you tell the audience a little bit about kind of who you are now and what do what do you do in this world?
Oh my gosh, where to start, right? So I'm currently based in Cebu. It's where you and I met a few years ago, but I'm originally from Manila and I kind of lived a little bit all over the place. Ever since 2017, actually, I have been practicing full time my work as an energy healer and a teacher. So I teach Reiki, but I also teach meditation and yoga and cacao ceremony. So I integrate plant medicine, cards, things like that. So I've been doing this work full time, which includes, kind of aside from the classes and private sessions, retreats, which I love to do. I have a podcast as well. I had 3 seasons,
Nice.
like 30 episodes. So I put that kind of on the back burner because running out of space on my laptop. Yeah, that's the funny reason for my stopping my podcast. But yeah, so that's why I'm looking forward to these conversations and I support what you do because I think it's very aligned with my life purpose.
Nice. Well, I've gotten to know you over the past couple of years, and I've seen changes on your journey, but I didn't know you, decades ago. So, like, let's go
Mhm.
back a little bit to who was Wendy before.
Oh my gosh, how far back do you want to go? There's a
It's up
couple
to you.
decades to look at.
Just keeping in mind that we're looking for stories that are, real transformation and kind of personal reinvention and just discovery and learning about ourselves. So, what do you think are the most relevant
Yeah, well,
changes?
there's a huge one that comes to mind simply because it's been so salient in my life recently. So like about 2 months ago, I had a test done because I had some kind of suspicious growths in my body and my doctor wanted me to get a biopsy and I really had to take a pause and kind of reevaluate, my my life choices, my values. And I actually decided not to get the biopsy and go like take a natural path of healing. And, you know, obviously with a lot of introspection and kind of like anxiety and big questions, existential questions, and so on. And with the support of two additional doctors who are, into holistic healing. So I've been working on that. And last week, I had a session with a friend of mine so the beautiful thing is that you meet a lot of healers and amazing people. So my friend Paulette is based in Peru. She's half American, half Filipina. And she is quite an expert in an energy healing modality called ThetaHealing. And so
Okay.
when I had my studio, I had a Reiki studio back in the day here in Cebu. I had a lot of different teachers come in, and I had one teacher teach Theta healing. So I did my first level, and it was a 3-day seminar, and I saw how deep it could go. So it has kind of like components of psychology and like there and Kabbalah and energy healing. So it's kind of like Reiki on steroids or something like that. So anyway, she heard about my health journey and she asked me if she could support in any way. And I was like, I would love to have a theta healing session because part of theta healing is kind of like remote viewing. I
Hmm.
don't know if you've ever heard of this, where like the practitioner kind of through a meditation kind of goes inside your body and gets this. It's like an endoscopy, except you're, like sitting in front of your friend and in
Okay.
front of your client. So that's one aspect of it. And another aspect is called kind of digging, and it can kind of go to the root of issues you might have, whether they be physical, emotional, mental. So we had a session last week, and since my growths were around my breast, I did a lot of kind of research, and it was like, okay, this is a heart chakra, and it's about self love, and it's about forgiveness, and I was so frustrated because I felt that I'd done so much work in that area, and I was
Hmm.
literally going in my mind through who are the people I haven't forgiven yet, and kind of like driving myself crazy in a sense, like having that energy towards that, which is kind of ironic, right? But so I needed some clarity on that. And what she found was so interesting for me because it wasn't what I thought it was. Like I thought it was something to do with a father wound. My parents separated when I was young and I didn't grow up with my father. I met him when I was 18. I grew up with a stepfather and I had some conflicts with him. So I was like, it's gotta be something about
Uh-huh.
the father.
Right.
And then what came up for her was there was like stored grief and sadness were the words she used in my body that I hadn't processed related to motherhood.
Hmm.
And so I was like, oh, wow. Like the first thing that came to mind wasn't my mother, it was actually me becoming a
As a
mother.
mother.
Yeah. And so everything, it just became very clear to me because I had a postpartum depression.
Mm.
So I had my daughter when I was 28 and I had none of the tools that I have today. I was meditating, kind of sporadically, like a weekend meditator, but none of that was enough to help me through the postpartum. And I was given antidepressants, and the antidepressants were super powerful. So they kind of like it was like a nuclear bomb, and it eradicated the depression
I
in a
see.
sense, you know. So at the time I was like, all right, like, this is cool. And I only took it for 3 months because I told myself I don't wanna had I felt like I might get
Get hooked.
dependent. And
Yeah.
so I was like 3 months. So but in 3 months, it's like my whole life changed. And I got a divorce, I got a job, I moved out, like, like
Mm.
boom, boom, boom. And so the session last week revealed that the medication acted like, as we know, medication often does, acted as a band-aid
Mm.
and as
Right.
a superficial fix,
Yeah.
right? It was super effective. But all of the processing that I was supposed to do mourning my maidenhood, all of that processing that's supposed to be done with a tribe, with a village, all of the grief,
It's like
my body
short-cutted.
changed or so much, none of that was done. So it
Yeah.
was all like buried. And then it just came out 20 years later, in other words. And it came out and it was like, okay, now you have these tools, you can take a look at me. And it wanted to be unpacked. So it was so beautiful. And the most amazing thing, and I told my friend Paulette, I was like, you won't believe it, but I just submitted a research proposal. So I'm in grad school, I'm taking clinical psych PhD program. And I said, the title of my proposal is effects of meditation and Reiki on postpartum depression women in mothers in Cebu City.
You had already chosen that?
So I had 3, and that was the one
Wow.
I finally submitted.
Okay.
Yeah, I had just submitted maybe a week before or something.
Wow.
And so it was like, oh my God. And I had asked so many questions like, why is this happening to me? Like, why me? Why this? And so it's like, well, so you could write this and you could do this and we can have this talk. And all of that came out. It was so, so powerful. Yeah.
Wow. Can we go back a little bit to that kind of that backstory of your, from what I know, you had kind of a professional career. So what was your
Mm.
life? A little bit about what your life
Oh
was
my
like
God.
before you discovered. I want to hear about, what led you to these modalities and learning about,
Mm.
but before we do, like, where was your life before?
So I think it might surprise you to know that I was not at all career oriented as a young graduate. So I took English, liberal arts. I took English in college. I did well, fairly well, but I'd started doing psychedelics in college recreationally. And so I think that so in high school, I was very competitive and I went to high school in New York City and my stepfather was working on Wall Street. So, it was like the 90s
Mm.
and then I went to UP and there was a whole shift. And then after that,
So New York to Manila.
yeah,
Okay.
well, via Hong Kong also, but I'll skip that part. And so when I met my daughter's father, I must have been already in a like mildly depressed state, which the pregnancy kind of precipitated. And so I was like, I didn't have a career. I was like, I don't know, I want to write. I was translating a book from French to English and
Hmm.
I was following my daughter's father. He was working for Doctors Without Borders. So I thought like, oh, it's so cool. We'll do this adventure stuff and I'll do like translate a book on the side or something. But after that happened, then I started working for the World Health Organization of all places. And so I started I don't know if you can call it a career in the United Nations system, but once you have one foot in
Hmm.
the United Nations system, it's easy to continue on that path. And so from WHO in Geneva, I started working at the United Nations in New York City. So part of me loved it. I've always kind of been a big city girl and being in an international environment and
Yeah.
it was super, super stimulating. And then part of me was like, this is killing your soul. This is not what you're meant to do. You should be outdoors. You shouldn't be in a 9 to 5.
So you were a
So there was
mother
a lot of that.
already before you started that career.
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes, yes. So I was a working mom and my daughter, how do I say? She was very like energetic and so she wouldn't sleep. So for many years I was lacking of sleep and rest and proper support and not knowing about boundaries, not knowing about, like putting my daughter before my own needs and then getting depleted and getting all this stuff that witness now with my clients and
Yeah.
that makes me so compassionate and so like driven to help them because like I've been there and I know how yeah, I didn't know there was any I thought it was normal, like we
Yeah.
we get to live with stress and exhaustion and
It's what
and
we
and
see around us.
ulcers. Yeah,
Yeah.
or like
It's
everyone
the
has
model.
it, you know.
So
So
so did you get to a, I mean, that's pretty dramatic shift from, at least it sounds like one, working with the UN in Geneva, New York, and then now, you're a energy healer. So like what sparked that transition, or what sparked
yeah,
how did you start learning about the power of these
sure.
modalities, and why were you so interested, or yeah.
So it had to take another crisis, it had to make another burnout. So I met my ex-husband in Geneva, and then we both decided to come to the Philippines and try something different, get out of that golden cage. And so we owned a restaurant. I went to culinary school. So in the meantime, so we were running a restaurant for 2 years. And for anyone who has ever worked in the food industry, it's like there's a high burnout rate. And I was
Yes.
totally, totally burnt out by the 2 years, 2 years into the business. And so my partner at the time was like, you got to take a break. And so I ended up going to Angkor Wat with my daughter. And that's where I heard about Reiki for the first time,
Hmm.
2015. And I just got intrigued. And I think I was so burnt out and like shell of myself and sad and depressed. And I was like, oh, this sounds amazing. Like just kind of Googling it. And I also wanted to send it to my mom who lives in the States. I'm like, oh, you can send it like distance Reiki. And it's like, this is super cool. And I just ended up finding a teacher, like, you know, things just fell into place. And the next month I took my first level when I was in Thailand. So I took my first level in Bangkok, brought it back to Cebu. People were excited about it and wanting to learn it. So I just continued with my second level, third level in Manila. And then I've been teaching ever since just
And
because,
just for
yeah,
people, anybody out there who's maybe just heard the word Reiki but doesn't really know anything about it. And of course
yeah.
they can Google it for more information, but like what would your 30-second introduction to
Sure.
Reiki be for someone who doesn't know?
So it's a practice from Japan and it's an energy healing system from
Okay.
Japan. It induces like a profound state of relaxation where our body is able to kind of reset. And
Nice.
so a lot of us don't have that opportunity, and like we think we're resting when we're sleeping, we think we're resting when we're zoning out on Netflix, but it's actually not a restorative type of rest. Like
Mm.
if we're watching a series or something, we still have our nervous system that's like
Yeah.
on overdrive, depending on what we're watching, right? But even if whether it's a drama or an action or something, it's still what do you call it, taxing on our system. And so things like sound healing, things like Reiki, these really allow for a deep reset, which is our everyone is so hungry for without even knowing it. Yeah.
So you were burned out from the 2 years of working in the restaurant, and you went to Angkor Wat, discovered the idea of Reiki. Was there a sort of a first experience for you that led you to realize the power of it? Like, what was the entry point for you? Did you go straight
I
to
had
teaching it, or did you?
I had no idea what it was. I went straight to learning it. So I
Okay, for
never even took a
yourself.
session.
Got it.
And I took a first so and people get confused. There's a class that I teach where you learn how to do it on yourself and others, and then there's a session. I think you've had one,
Somebody's
right?
yes, you
Or yeah.
yes.
Come over, lay down, and I do my thing, and then I'm like, okay.
So you never
And
had
for
a
those,
session, you just went straight to
I
learning
never
how
even
to.
had a session.
Okay.
Yeah, I never even had. I was just like, teach me how to do this. I want, like, I need this. I really need this. I was like, whatever, I'll do whatever to feel better.
And then what were your experiences in the early days of learning?
Oh, my first day of Reiki class at the time was a 2-day class. I was just like, yeah, I know all of this. I felt like I was just remembering stuff.
Hmm.
So it was like actually, now in hindsight, I realized, I mean, it wasn't a coincidence that I picked Angkor Wat because Angkor Wat is like a portal. It's like a high energy location on the planet. It's one of those very, very special locations where awakenings are actually possible. I
Hmm.
keep looking at your thing and I'm thinking of Angkor Wat because it's like it's a holy site overgrown by nature. It's just like how more powerful can you get? I didn't realize that at the time, of course, but now that I'm working with energy, I realize that it's everywhere, like in locations, make a difference as well. I like working in Sol Sierra, which also has that higher vibration energy when we're in the city surrounded by cement and
Yeah.
malls and like noise pollution, then it's different. It's we experience life differently. It's just everything was like conspiring for that precise moment where I was like, I'm getting attuned to Reiki, and like, yeah, I remember it like, oh, and then from then, other teachers, doors, the studio, things started opening up, and it's just like pieces of a big, huge puzzle that are coming together every day. Just like what happened that last week. That's another big piece right there. So it's fun, it's exciting, keeps me motivated when times are a little difficult. Yeah.
What are you seeing when it comes to like, I don't know because I'm not at Souls Air all the time, but some of the events I've been to, I've been noticing it looks like there's kind of a trend in the Philippines where people are starting to pay more attention to more progressive ideas like these. And so I've experienced Reiki, sound healing. I've had a meditation practice for a number of years now. I think most of these things, plant medicine, I've had quite a few experiences and I found tons of benefit. Like I absolutely love sound healing.
Yeah.
And I guess my question is, for people out there listening who are maybe in that rat race or feeling really a lot of high levels of stress and anxiety, whether they are super aware of how much that's building up or how constant that is, but like where would you recommend people? How do you recommend people get started?
Mm.
And maybe what are some of the benefits you see for people?
So first of all, where they can get started, I mean, for me, the most accessible is YouTube. And like everyone, I think everyone has access to YouTube nowadays.
I think
So
so.
I have a lot of people who first time students and clients who are like, "Oh yeah, I experienced Reiki like on YouTube." And so it took them a while to decide because it's an investment as well, right? And time, energy, and finances. So it's like was watching Reiki on YouTube. I don't even know if it's real. We were doing like these things, and then eventually their curiosity builds up, and then the timing is ripe, and then they show up like in circle or in class or in a session. Same with sound healing, right? I love sound healing even on YouTube. Of course, it's not the same,
Quite the
but
same.
it's still I still find it powerful.
Mm.
So I would put it in the background during a session. I would, if I'm studying, if I want to do, I mean, meditation. So I would just put it on YouTube. So I think YouTube is amazing for that. And to your point that there's a huge kind of interest, not only in the Philippines but all over the world, which is great for us because there are so many amazing teachers, podcasters and so on. And it's more like we have so much choice to find something that resonates for us. There's
Yeah.
so many amazing YouTubers, podcasters, casters that I follow, and then they talk about these topics. They introduce them, and so we have so much access without even having to leave the house. I think it's important eventually to sit in community at one point because
Mm.
that's also that organic exchange from human to human, face to face is
I agree.
it's priceless. Yeah, but in the that's a good way to start for people who are afraid to. It takes a lot of courage, right, to
Mm.
sit in circle. Yeah.
Yeah, I love what you're saying there because I mean that's kind of everything that emerges the foundational ideas of why we're trying to do this is to help people realize how much access we have to the ability to
Yeah.
grow and learn. We have
Yeah.
access to I mean we're so blessed to live in a period of time where we have access to all knowledge basically, right? And but
Basically.
the challenge is where do you start and
Yeah.
how do you use your
Mhm.
time in valuable ways, which is why conversations like this are so useful because like, people's minds can get opened up and you just opened my mind thinking, well, I know I can learn about history and I know I can learn about personal development and I know I could even do yoga on YouTube, but I never
Yeah.
thought I could really have the beginnings of an experience with Reiki through YouTube. That's so cool.
Yeah, yeah.
How do you give people tips on, what do you do if you I don't know if you've ever analyzed this or not, but how do you filter
Mm.
who to listen to? Like when you go out,
Oh,
let's
yeah.
just use I don't know, you want to use Reiki or sound healing? Can you use one as an example and say, if I went to YouTube and I wanted to find something valuable,
Yeah.
I would filter it this way. What do you do?
So I can't describe a logical or rational process. It's really about the residents. So I think if there's somebody that I makes me feel good or the message is I feel like they're speaking to me directly. I don't know if that ever happens to you.
I
Then
love that.
I'll
Great
just
answer.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's important for everyone to be able to connect with themselves in that sense. Like to be so present that they can
Yeah.
receive and like, okay, this guy's for me. Like this message is for me.
Okay, so I think that's such an amazing and cool answer that I'm like, yeah, duh, that's exactly the answer. It's like somatic, like a whole body yes, like when you resonate with something and you're just like, yep, you kind of feel a click. Okay, but I'm not sure if I went back 15 years ago if I would
Yeah.
know what the heck you're talking about or if I would be
Mm.
in tune enough to
Yeah.
trust
So
my quote unquote intuition or something. So are there any tips you could give people to
yeah.
listen better, to, trust? Go. Good.
Before I was in tune with my body, which I was not before I started Reiki, by the way. Before I started yoga and Reiki, I was so disconnected from my body. It had to appeal to my intellect. So that's the only thing that mattered. It's like, oh, this guy's so like super smart and
That's
he
how I was
sounds
too.
like so clever. But that's a good entry point.
Okay.
I feel like there are speakers who sound smart and clever, and then they leave a trail of crumbs. It's like
Who they
when I
learn
was
from.
taking yoga teacher training, and we were talking about how some people maybe take yoga with the wrong intention, but there is no wrong intent. It's just our judgment. There is no wrong intention. If they're there and they're on the mat and they're like present, hopefully they're present. That helps. Then that's a great place to start. And then who knows later, they might stop or they might continue and they might be a teacher and they might be doing yoga. deep meditation at later down the line. So I feel like it's the same thing. I'm thinking of like Jordan Peterson. I don't know if you're, yeah, you
I
know
do
Jordan Peterson.
quite a bit.
So I don't know him that much, but I love him because of I love his energy. I haven't read his books. Like one of our common friends was recommending one to me. So I don't know. I don't think I agree with all of what he says, but I think what I love about him is he's so authentic and passionate, and like I almost don't care what he has to say. Right? Because if all of us were like that, instead of trying to be someone else or be people pleasing or like try to look clever
Yeah.
and get the
Yeah.
most likes, like, the world would look so, so, so different. So
Yeah. No, I think
it's
that's a
hard for me to answer your question.
no, I think you did it. I think that's very, very valuable, and just some of the, you know, the way I resonate with what you're saying is very similar for me. And I think back, I was just talking to Gladys about this, I think yesterday, that I can remember certain thought leaders, influencers, whatever, people that I came across. I think one of them was that pops into my head is Eckhart Tolle. When I first heard
Mm.
him, it was the first time I heard him was like on an Oprah interview, I think, and I'm like, this guy's really weird. And so I found this, my
He is.
natural at that time, my natural response was a little bit kind of leaning back. I could have, been kind of closed or judged, and then I would have been maybe just decided to reject or not get the value. But I've really I've tried to stay really committed to not doing that. It's like no matter who it is, if other people seem to think they're valuable, other people I trust have learned from them, like I try to just wait and see, maybe
Yeah.
I can find the value in this person. And then but I love what you said about Jordan Peterson too, because I love his energy and how he unpacks ideas. I don't agree with everything he says, but I think we can synthesize. And I also love what you said about just start anywhere. It's like if you start with yoga and you'll evolve from there, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be the best choice first. You'll learn, and your filter will get better just by starting somewhere,
Mm.
I guess.
I mean, even you can even start with like, martial arts or even like car racing, I feel, right? Because what I'm realizing as I'm getting older is like anything you choose to do and you practice long enough, right? They say it takes what 10,000 hours for mastery or something. Anything you do 10,000 hours or so, whatever number of hours, you're gonna be in like that God zone, and then you'll be like, oh wow, there's this is cool. Like this is different. This is not like the
Yeah.
everyday grind sort of thing. So do you know Stealing Fire, that book by Stephen Kotler?
Cutler. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So he talks about a little bit about that, like being in this zone, like how the Navy SEALs do it, and
Flow.
like athletes, yeah, like getting into that flow. And then once you tasted that flow, you can be like, okay, I can actually reconnect that. I don't have to climb Everest. I can actually do some deep breathing, or like I can do some
Yeah.
pay or something, and or even drink cacao, like I'm drinking cacao. So yeah, you can really start anywhere. So follow what lights you up. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. And, Emerge is all about learning and self teaching and getting in the habit of improving ourselves constantly and exploring things. And just on the topic of the 10,000 hour, it's actually kind of a myth that
Oh, is it?
Malcolm Gladwell started that, and it got
Oh,
misunderstood.
okay,
But
okay.
it's like the principle, the number of hours is just wrong because
Yeah, it's
that's like
irrelevant.
if you want to be Tiger Woods at golf, which most people just never want to go to that level. But I do think committing ourselves to consistently getting deep enough in learning something that we start to get in this really steep growth curve, because it's like when you first start doing something,
Mhm.
basketball, probably yoga, anything, right? In the very beginning, it kind of sucks because
Yeah.
you suck.
It's
it's
difficult. Yeah,
like
you suck.
it's like
You
you
have to
don't
be
like
okay with sucking, right?
yeah, you got to do that just long enough to where you're like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm actually getting better, and
Better.
I can get better, and then you start
Yeah.
climbing that growth curve, and that's when you start getting in flow, and
Yes.
when it's super exciting. And I think that getting addicted to that feeling is the key to lifelong learning, because like I can learn this, I can learn that, and continually engaging new things. So
But there's also like I feel like it's a double-edged sword because that there comes a time where you plateau,
mhm,
and I have a tendency to when I start to plateau and I don't have that
yep.
the dopamine rush from the growth curve, and I'm like, nah, I'm gonna look somewhere. Like that happens too. So I feel like you have to be careful with that. Like, for example, when I remember when I started free diving and I couldn't even imagine going down, like, the requirement for the certification was 13 meters. And I was like, oh my God, how am I going to do that? And then by the time I was like, my best performance was 22 meters. And I was like, oh my God, this is so amazing. And then I couldn't go back to it. Then I like got discouraged, so that's like not a good attitude.
Is it?
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know.
I don't know.
In my experience, like I think there's been a lot of benefit in my life to getting reasonably good at a lot of things because you get this mental. I mean, it's up to people. You get to choose what you want to do.
Yeah,
If
yeah.
something keeps you passionate long enough that you actually want to be world class, okay,
Mhm.
great. Then do it your whole life. But
That's
I
true
really think there's a
too.
lot of value because we get this broad understanding of how the world works, and we get to understand ourselves better when we
Yeah,
go.
and our bodies, yeah, like
Yeah.
we're
So I don't know. I mean, for me, I'm not sure it's necessarily a bad thing. It's like you get pretty good and you're like, I'm not sure
Mm.
I care that much. And then you outgrow it and go learn something else. But anyway. Well, I love your story of how you've found these things. And also I want to say thank you for the value that you've brought personally to me and I also to a lot of people that I know in Cebu. What would be some recommendations that you could give people around I think let's talk a little bit about meditation. You said you had a little bit of a habit
Mm,
going way, way back.
yeah,
What's been your journey and what could you share with people on the value or the
yeah.
journey?
So I had a bit of a life crisis when I was 17 and I left home when I was 17. I had to drop out of high school. And a friend gave me a book of Thich Nhat Hanh called Pieces Every Step. And that was like my first introduction to very, very simple meditation practices, just breathing, like saying a mantra, like breathing in, I calm myself, breathing out, I smile. And those, I think they really saved me so many times because I brought that book with me as I was starting university in Manila. And like I mentioned, there was that big style shift.
Mm,
And so that really, really helped me. And as a matter of fact, throughout my college years in Manila, I was meditating quite a bit, going to Sokogakai, so like a Japanese big, big institution. I was going to Tibetan Buddhists, wherever I found, like, me, I have my nose everywhere. And I would find a community and practice with them. So I was doing that a lot. And then after I left Manila, I stopped practicing. Sorry, what was your question again?
what do you think are some of the I
Benefit?
think
Oh,
everybody's probably heard of it. Everybody knows somebody who has a habit, but not that
benefit.
many
Yeah.
people have really experienced the benefits, I think.
Oh, yeah.
What yeah.
I well, I have really, and this is also funny because people are surprised, but I had a super bad temper when I was younger, like I'm very reactive and anger issues, like profound anger issues that would come up in my relationships, people close to me. And so meditation really helps you slow down that process, like enough for you to actually not engage in that, you know, potentially destructive behavior. So it's helped me with that.
Yeah.
And I feel like I've come a long way from, like throwing stuff out of moving cars and breaking furniture and which I did in my 20s.
I had some anger issues back then too. Yeah,
Right? Yeah.
a lot.
So meditation has helped a lot. The thing is, I feel like you can't sell meditation because if you're not ready, it's going to frustrate you. You're going to just feel bad. You're just
Fair
gonna
enough.
feel bad. What helped me develop a profound meditation practice was actually Reiki. Why? Because when we do Reiki, it's a protocol, it's a system. It's like a neat system that Sui Sensei devised. Like Japanese are so good at that. And so you're doing something actively, like you're following a thing, but at the same time, you're putting yourself in that meditative state. So you're actually meditating without trying to meditate. So you're
Mm,
hacking your brain. 'Cause so many people are like, I want to meditate. I know it's good. I can't do it. I have like so many thoughts,
yeah,
right? So that's always what people are saying. So kind of like when you start Reiki, you're kind of bypassing that whole thing. Because you're given instructions and it's a little more tangible, although it's still
yeah,
very like abstract. So that was helpful. I mean, in Reiki, you have to hold let's say so you're clearing energy, like energy patterns. So you're like, have to hold the position for a while. So what else are you going to do, right? You can't be on your phone while you're doing that
hmm,
or whatever. You're gonna eventually ease into a meditative state in spite of yourself. So that was really helpful. Of course, my journey with yoga, that's a big part of yoga practice. Like the yoga that people know or think about when they hear the word yoga, it's actually one small part of the yoga practice, the physical part, the asana, right?
Hmm.
There's 8 limbs of it.
Right.
And so the whole purpose is to be able to sit quietly and calm the mind and quiet the mind. So it's not like you start meditation and then your mind is blank. Like that's such a myth. And even I get distracted. I'm sure,
Me too.
you have a
Yeah.
practice and I'm sure you get distracted. So first
And
of
it's
all,
okay.
like debunk those
Yeah.
myths that our mind all of a sudden goes blank. Like when you're this morning, I trained my friend opened a jujitsu dojo. There's kirtan, which is chanting, and then 15 minutes meditation. This guy was in the dojo and he was like, I feel like he was ruffling plastic for 15 minutes, honestly. And so I had this internal struggle almost the whole time. And I'm like, I'm gonna tell Ian, he gotta tell these guys to shut up during meditation. And I was like, I wanted so much to open my eyes and be like, who's that guy with making so much noise? And I was like, no, it's you're meditating. So that was my practice today.
Yeah.
And then I saw myself doing that. I was like, okay, so this is your practice today. All right, whatever. Like you just sit there and like finish it up. And so that happened.
I think I
And
have
I'm like,
dogs. I have dogs barking next door when I'm meditating so that I can learn to notice what it's making me feel when these dogs are barking.
so all of those, the thoughts, the distractions, those are all part of the practice.
Exactly. Exactly.
That is like the meat and potatoes of the practice. It's like, okay, I can't do this. I'm gonna stop. No, it's like, wow, this is so challenging. And let's try again. Let's keep trying. Let's keep doing it.
Nice. Thank you for sharing. I'd love to talk with just a few minutes we have left about what are some of the most important plant medicines that you think people here in the Philippines should know about?
Off the record or
I mean,
yeah.
we can be honest here.
So I love to work with three plants mainly. Well, more than that, but the three main ones are cacao, which I often share in circle, as you know. Tobacco in the form of hape, the tobacco snuff, which is it's a bit intense compared to obviously cacao's
Mild?
very gentle.
Yeah.
And you've had hape can be very uncomfortable, very, very uncomfortable, but very enlightening for me. Before this call, I was writing a post about messages I got from Hapes. Boom,
Wow.
you get these downloads. And then also mushroom, which is abundant in the Philippines and which has helped so many people come out of, depression and anxiety and existential crises, which we don't really talk about so much, but they're there. And I personally, one of the reasons I'm in grad school is that I wanted to see if I could also contribute to making this medicine more accessible because I don't think it has the side effects that a synthetically made medicine would have, which is what I experienced, right? And we were talking about earlier. So it's much more in tune with the body, like
Yeah.
that type of medicine.
It's really exciting to me that John Hopkins and so many
Yes.
other the kind of research and credibility that psilocybin is regaining that it lost through the completely garbage war on drugs that Nixon started, but it's really exciting to see that. And
Very
I
exciting.
and thank you for the work you're doing to help people understand the value. And
Thank you
I mean, these things have
as
been
well.
here on this planet for us for a very long time.
Before
And
we were here.
yeah, here on this planet before us
Yeah,
and for
exactly.
us.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing those things. Thank you for being here and sharing your story and also for the support you've been providing to the Emerge community in Cebu so far. And just as we wrap up, I want to ask a couple of questions. One would be maybe we could put some links in the show notes if you've got other things you want to share later. But if somebody was talking to you right now and said, "Hey, I'd love to really learn some of the things you've learned," what would be a resource or two that you could point them in the direction of that's been meaningful for you? Could be a book, YouTube, podcast. Like, what stands out that you could recommend?
Sure. I mean, if they're interested in the type of work I do, then definitely I would send them to my website. I have a
We
blog,
we will.
and then yeah, the podcast. There's some nice conversations there talking about those things we mentioned: energy healing, plant medicine, stuff like that. And the YouTube channel as well. I've had some nice conversations with different healers. My martial arts teacher is one of them. My meditation teacher as well. And
Nice.
then like be curious and kind of be brave because it feels scary at first, but community is very welcoming. Yeah.
You seem like somebody who's very curious. Have you always been that way?
Very, very curious. Yeah.
Nice.
And I like people who have this share that same quality.
Love
We
it.
get along. Yeah.
All right. What last question, just for fun, if you think about yourself 5 years ago and then think about yourself now, what are maybe one of the things you feel you've an area that you've grown the most?
I think that over the past 5 years, I've been able to shed a lot of ego, actually. Yeah, sometimes you can develop like a spiritual ego when you start going on this path. And I think it's really important to be able to remain humble. Even this whole my health issue is so humbling to me. Putting myself in vulnerable situations is very humbling as well. So I know I have still, more to work through, but I think that's a difference. I used to be also more reactive still, and now it's really less about me compared to 5 years ago, I think.
Nice. Love
Yeah.
it. Thank you for sharing. You
Thank
look you
you.
look like glowing. Are you doing well now, as far as you can tell?
I feel good. Actually, it's funny because I was kind of under the weather last week. We were with friends who had a cold, and I've been itching to train because I'm going to a martial arts retreat in less than a month. And I'm feeling so pressured that I'm out of shape compared to the others, competitive side. And so I was like, it was so hard for me to allow myself to rest last week. And then today I realized that after training, so it's like a 2.5 hour session, I felt so, so energized after the training, like more than before. So it's really interesting. Like, I think all of us are different energetically. Like, sometimes you actually just need to exert effort
Mm,
to jumpstart that energetic stagnation.
yeah.
So yeah,
I
I
think
got lost there.
working out actually generates energy. A lot of people don't
Yeah.
realize that. It's like we can actually
Yeah, yeah, because a lot of
yeah,
people are like, "You gotta rest," because like this. So of course we have to rest, but it's also like we also have
yeah,
to move to jumpstart. Yeah.
totally. Well, Wendy, thank you so much for being here
Thank you
and really enjoyed the
for having
conversation.
me. Likewise, and I hope to see you soon. All
Yes. Talk soon.
right. Take care.
Thank you so much for listening to this interview on Emerge Stories. We really hope that something here sparked your curiosity or maybe helped you think about something in your life just from a little bit of a different angle or perspective, maybe opened up your mind to something you might be able to do in your life to take more ownership of your own learning and growth. That's the goal of this show. So please join our community, like and share, and tell other people about these stories if they're meaningful for you. And thanks so much for being here.